Okay, Nesivos Shalom, Parshas Mishpatim. So Parshas Mishpatim, we know, is always a little bit of it's a harsh change of scenery. We have the Parshas, especially of Shmais, Ve'era, Boy, B'Shalach, Yisrael. It's the miracles of all of of going out of Mitzrayim, of the Geula from Mitzrayim. And then we come to Mishpatim, and we get into very technical halachas, beginning with Eved Ivri, which itself is a very strange set of halachas. So it always requires a little bit of thought. How do we change gears? But also more than that, why would the Torah do that? We're used to, when we get to the Parshas in Vayikra, we're used to drier topics, but Mishpatim, it seems like we're, so, Al Pi Chassidus, in a lot of the Chassidish Farm, they work with trying to figure out what in Mishpatim, Al Derech Avodah, not just halachas of monetary halachas, but the whole Parshat Mishpatim deals with monetary halachas. It's all about damages and various different economic halachas. There's an interesting Gemara. You'll see on the sheet, the first Gemara, I just quoted it. The Gemara tells us in Baba Kama, those who are doing Daf Yomi, this was about 2 months ago. Actually, today it's Tzadi Hey, so 65 days ago. This would have been 64 days ago. So the Gemara tells us a very strange thing. Now, I put the whole piece of the Gemara there because we're going to come back to the first part later, but we'll just read it the way it's read. Tana Rabbanan, Chasidim Harishonim hayu matzniyan kitzoiseim uzchuiseim b'soich stoiseim. That the Chasidim Harishonim, and it's important to note the word, I should have bolded it, Chasidim, that the Gemara is identifying early Chasidim. This is before the Baal Shem Tov. So now what we're used to calling Chasidim, although many of them probably are also Chasidim, but this is talking about Chasidim, and we'll see that Nesivos Shalom is going to explain to us what a real Chassid is. So Chasidim Rishonim used to hide their thorns. They would have thorns in the field, and their glass, they would have sharp glass. They would hide it in their fields. Umamikin lahem shloisha tvachim. They would bury them 3 tvachim deep, kadesh lo ya'akev hamachresha, so that it wouldn't hurt other people's plows. People wouldn't get damaged by them. Okay, that Gemara we're going to come back to. The Gemara says, Rav Shesha Shadulu Benura, he would burn them in a fire. He didn't even want them around at all. Rava Shadulu Bediglas, he would throw them into the Tigris River. He didn't want them around. Okay, now the Gemara says an interesting thing. Am Rabbi Yehuda, Haiman de Boile Meve Chasida. If somebody wants to be a chassid, if you want to be a chassid, L'kayim Mili de Nezikin. You should keep the halachas of Nezikin. And we know that there's a seder in Shas called Nezikin, but Nezikin generally, more when we get to the specifics of it, deal with damages. Baba Kama is mostly about Nezikin. It's about damages. Somebody damages somebody else. What's he chayiv for? The entire Masechta Baba Kama is dealing with that. Rava Amamili de Avos. Rava says if you want to become a chassid, you should learn Pirkei Avos. And V'amrile, others said mili de brachas. You should learn brachas, the halachas of the brachas. So the Nesivos Shalom, the Rabbi asks the following question, which really everybody who learns this Gemara has this question. The first paragraph there, and we won't read the entire piece inside, but we'll read certain lines as it's kedai to read. So he quotes this Gemara, and he says he doesn't understand. He says, if you look in the middle of that first paragraph, it says, if I were to ask you, if you didn't see this Gemara, like if you wanted to work on yourself, what things should you learn? You want to become a chassid. We'll see, he's going to define, in the third paragraph, he'll define what a chassid is. But if I want to work on myself, to become a higher, more elevated type of person, so avos and brachas makes some sense, right? Avos, we know, avos is all about midas. Brachas is always thanking Hashem, always thinking about Hashem. It's always acknowledging that everything comes from Hashem. So we understand why those are things that were, but damages, well, why are the halachas of damages, or to live your life being careful about damages? Why is that something that makes somebody a chassid? So that's his question. First of all, why is it different than any other monetary halachas? Why is it any different than loans? Why is it any different than, and also why is it really any different than any other mitzvah? He said, what he's saying here, chiyuv medina, is what is damages? My cow went into your field and gored your cow, right? It's not a midas chasidus that I now pay you for the damage that my cow caused. I should have watched my cow better, right? So I owe you that money. If I damage something of yours, I owe you that money. It's not a midas chasidus, it's the basic rule of law. Every society in the world, it needs those kinds of rules Otherwise, the society can't function. You need to be, if you do something, if you put it in today's day, if I was pulling out of a parking spot and I wasn't being so careful and I hit your car, I have to pay for the damage to your car. I mean, it's not a midas chasidus. That's the basic rule of law. So that's what the Rebbe's bothered by. So he says, so if you think about this, b'derech ha'avoda, he says, al pimad isa, we know that the first Mishnah in Baba Kama tells us, arba avos nezikin. There are 4 categories of damagers. Hashar. Now, obviously, the Gemara, if you've learned at the beginning of Baba Kama, has many different opinions on what these things are, but we're going to go with the basic, simple, straightforward understanding, which is, we have the shar, an ox that does damage, right? So if my ox does damage to your animal, Bahabar, or if I dug a pit and your animal fell into the pit, or you fell into the pit. Hamaveh, which the Gemara, at least according to one opinion, is Shane. My animal goes into your field and eats your cabbage patch, right? So it destroyed your cabbage patch. Vahever, or I lit a fire and the fire got out of control and it spread to the next field and did damage. So he says, Arba elu mechuvanim. So that's very nice that those are 4 types of nezikin, but what are they? What do they correspond to? Keneged dalid chelka Yetzer Hora. These are 4 methodologies of the Yetzer Hora, 4 ways in which the Yetzer Hora gets us to do an avera. See, if a person is acting completely rational, we would never do an avera. Right? The Gemara even says that only a person only does an avera if there's a mili, if there's ruach shtus that goes into his head, right? If there's some kind, if we were being completely rational, if we could be 100% rational all the time, we would never do anything wrong. We would do only those things that are in our best interest, and that's to serve Hashem and not to do an avera. So, what is the Yetzer Hora? What are his tools? How does he get us to this point where we don't act rational? We're generally rational human beings. Most of us make reasoned decisions. We don't just act on whim. So how does the Yetzer Hora, what does he do? So he has 4 major weapons that he uses against us. That these are found within a person. Hashar, and each of these is hinted to in one of these 4 avos nezikin. Hashar, Maram is algeus. The ox, that hints to arrogance. Arrogance, we know that when a person is arrogant, right, a person is feels that he's better than other people, or he feels that he's superior, or he just feels that he deserves more than others, that leads him to make poor choices. Arrogance, I don't think it needs a lot of explanation. We understand that arrogance does not lead always to the best decisions. He says, he quotes a Shemais Rabbah that, like Chazal say, Geya shebebehema shar, the most arrogant of the animals is the ox. So shar represents arrogance. The Yetzer Hora convinces you, you don't have to worry about this guy so much, or you don't have to worry about these halachas were not meant for you. You're better than that, right? Your person has arrogance. By contrast, what's the opposite tool that he uses? Is habar, the pit, which is in Yana Hanafila Biyush. When a person feels there's no hope, right? He feels like he's in a deep pit. A person feels hopeless. I've messed up so many times. What's the point of even trying anymore? Or nothing's going right. I'm not even going to bother trying. Right? These types of concepts. A person feels like it's a waste. I'm never going to get it right. Everything I've messed up everything. It's never going to work. This, if you learned any of the Torahs of Rabbi Nachman Yish, we know that Rabbi Nachman with Yish, he considered to be the worst midah, because when a person gives up, so he's not in the fight anymore. He just doesn't feel like fighting. So that's the Yetzer Hora's second tool. What's the third one? Hamav is a hashen. This is when the animal eats, right? Eating. Shein is eating. Shein literally means a tooth. Hainu taivas achila. A person knows, anybody who's ever tried to diet or if had any kind of issues, we know, rationally I know I should not have that piece of cake. I don't need all the bar charts I know that I shouldn't have that third piece of cake by Kiddush on Shabbos. And yet I find myself eating the third piece of cake. Why is that? Because I have a very strong taiva for achila. The taiva, the desire for eating, and especially, it doesn't even have to be necessarily an avera, but we know it's unhealthy for us. Many of the problems that humankind deals with is because people don't eat properly, where we all do it, and that's just something that it's not rational, because rationally I know, even if you ask the person as he's reaching for the piece of cake, he knows I should not eat that. Right? But But he does. Why? Because that's one of the powers of the Yetzer Hora. Vahever, what's that fire? Marum is a taiva Yetzer Hora boyer b'kesh. Then we know that there are other taivas that burn within us with a fire, and they make us not think rationally. Right? When a person gets caught up in something that he wants to do, even if he knows again rationally that it's not good for him. By the way, these all apply not only when we talk about mitzvahs and averas, but even like good decisions and bad decisions in life. You can almost trace every bad decision to one of these four, right? Something consumes me. It could even be something innocuous, but I get consumed. You see people, they get consumed with, I have to have this thing, even though it really makes no sense. Why do you need that thing? What's it going to do for you in your life? But it becomes now like this mission, and everything else gets blocked out. That comes from fire. That's like a fire that burns within us. So these four things are the way the Yetzer Hora gets us to not use the rational brain and to use and to give into taiva. The Elohein arba avos nezikin hasherish l'chol hara. This is the source of all evil. Any poor decision, any bad act that we do comes from one of these four, or a combination. It very often can be a combination of them, right? V'haiman deboile mehevi chasida. So therefore, now the Rabbi says, what were the words of the Gemara? The one who wants to be a chassid. If you want to really be a chassid, which right now we're translating as somebody who wants to serve Hashem on a high level, but we'll see exactly what the word chassid comes from. L'kayim mili d'nezaken. He has to keep these ideas on nezikin. L'akar as dalid sharshi hara halal nimtzabadam. These four things are represented in damages. So the person has to uproot these four things, these four ways that the Yetzer Hora gets to him. Okay, but we'll see a little bit more. So he says, he says, why specifically chasida? The Gemara could have said somebody wants to be a tzaddik, somebody wants to be a good person, right? Why chasida? He says, Dihine toyer chassid hu migzeres chesed. The chassid comes from the word chesed. Right? We see that just with an extra yud, but the word chassid is based on the word chesed. See, the chesed hu ha'pu'ula v'achassid hu ish ha'chesed. So when I do something, when I give the guy who's coming around collecting, I give him $1, that's an act of chesed, right? If I'm a person who acts constantly with chesed, that makes me a chassid. Somebody who is an ish chesed, he's going to explain, it's not just that I do occasional acts of chesed, but if I'm a person who is a man of chesed, then I become a chassid. This is a person whose entire essence is all about doing good and chesed for other people. He's obsessed with it, right? He lives chesed. I was going to give the example. Rabbi Zach's not paying attention. Like the Zakutinskys, right? They live chesed. They look their whole life. How could I do more chesed? Everybody does. Every Jew does chesed, but there are people who they live chesed. Everything is an opportunity. I have such a friend like this in Eretz Yisrael. If he has like a day where there's nothing to do, he's literally like running around trying to find ways to do chesed. Eretz Yisrael, it's more obvious. I wouldn't say that there's not people like that here, but it's more obvious when you see certain people in Eretz Yisrael that their whole life is what can I do for somebody else. That makes a person a chassid. Because of this, because this is the driving, I think I just chased them away, but because this is the driving force in his life. All he wants is more and more chesed. He is considered a chesed, and he's always looking for chesed. So if you want to be a chassid, it doesn't mean there's plenty of good people who want to do good deeds. They want to do mitzvahs. But Ella the boile mehebi chasida, they're longing to do chesed, right? This is somebody who wants to be a chassid, not just that he wants to be a good person, but he wants to be a chassid. He wants to be somebody who's consumed with chesed. He wants his entire essence of who he is to be somebody who does good, which will lead him to be somebody who's always looking to do what's right and what's straight in the eyes of Hashem. So this is a famous klal of the Maral that the Nesivos Shalom himself quotes many, many times, that there's three ways. If a person wants to be complete, you could have people who are good in different areas. What does it take for a person to be complete, to be shalom? So he says, you need the inyan hashlamas koil gimel chalakim. There's three relationships, 3 ways, 3 areas in a person's life that he has to be complete with in order to be a really complete person. Shalom bein oil vein bayre. First of all, your relationship with Hashem has to be in good shape, right? Your relationship with Hashem has to be in good standing. Shalom bein oil vein chaverov. You have to be good with other people. You have to take care of other people, help people out when they need help, be kind to people. Yeah, that's a relationship. And then v'sholem, which sometimes is the hardest, beino levin atzmai, to be at peace with himself, to be okay with oneself. She says, "A gimel chelke hashlemus halalu hem tachlis hashlemus." If a person accomplishes completing himself in all three of these areas, then he's completely complete. V'zehu bir. So he says, we started the Gemara that there were three things. We had three different opinions of what a person should do if he wants to be a chassid. Either nezikin, avos, or brachas. He says that's these three things. Gimel hadei yeshuva kan lahayman deboilem have a chasida sheroitz lahapek mahus letoiv be'etzem. That if a person wants to be a chassid, he needs to work on these three areas, and that's what's hinted to in these three topics, as he's going to explain now. So number one, he's going to explain the one that we started talking about based on the arba avos nezikin, which is Rabbi Yehuda Omer l'kayim mila din nezakin. So the first opinion we saw in the Gemara is you have to be mekayim, you have to keep all of the things of nezikin. So he says, this is the area, very obviously, right, clearly, that I have to be good with my fellow. If my ox shouldn't gore his ox. If it does, I have to pay him. That's interpersonal relationships. Now he says, but don't make the mistake that this is after I did damage. After my ox did damage, so now I'm going to pay the guy. That's what we said before in the Rebbe's question, that's just the basic rule of law. If I damaged you, I have to pay you. Here he's saying that's not what we mean here. That's not what we mean here. Shishal nechaveri ifaisa, that I have to, right? We just had this in the Gemara a few days ago in Daf Yomi, that besides having to pay the guy back, you also have to ask for mechila because you damaged him. That's not chasidus, right? Ella meikar adin. That's the basic rule of law. That's that you owe him. Ella mili the chasidus huzer shem lechatchila nizar shleigim menu kol nezek v'tzar luzelasai. A person who wants to be a chassid means he goes to lengths to make sure that he's never in that position to harm somebody else. He doesn't want to just fix it once I harmed somebody. He wants to make sure that he never harms somebody, which is the Gemara that we started with. That was what the Gemara was introduced with. That they used to bury the thorns and the glass, or throw it into the fire, or throw it into the river. They would bury it 3 tvachim deep. Why? They didn't have to. The halacha doesn't require that you have to bury your thorns 3 tvachim in the ground. You could leave your thorns at certain places, but then there's a chance somebody will get hurt. And halacha will require then that you have to pay for that. But they don't want to take that chance. I don't want to even come to the possibility of harming somebody else. They don't want to cause any pain or any kind of worry or anything to another person. Therefore, somebody who wants to be a chassid, he has to be mekayim, not just keep the halacha, but he has to be mekayim. He has to go to the lifnim mishuras hadin of the zaken to make sure he doesn't hurt anybody. And he says, be careful not to harm your friend's money. Certainly not his body. Not even by speech, not even an insult, not even something negative. Or anything. These people run away from anything that might possibly cause any kind of pain or discomfort to another human being. That's how we get the second category that we mentioned before of Shalom Chaverev, that a person is complete with other people and he's good with other people. This is a person who lives his life. I want him to take as much precaution as possible not to possibly hurt another human being. Okay. Now we go to the second one. So that was Nezikin. What was the second one? Was Avos. We said learning Avos. So what relationship is that? So Mili Avos hu inyan Hashem is beino levin atzmai. That's yourself. And we'll explain here because it sounds a little bit similar. But he says, "Mesechtes Avos kula hadracha la'adam binyanim midas." What is Avos about? If you learn Pirkei Avos, right? Most of us learn between Pesach and Shavuos, and then some go till after the summer, right? It's about midas. It's about the proper way for a person to act. How do you become whole and okay with yourself? Now this may be something that's not going to affect anybody else. If I could have certain bad midas that will never hurt that may not ever hurt anybody else, right? But they're not good midas. How do you come to shleimus? By fixing those midas. Like for example, hakina, hataiva, hakavod, metzinas adam and olam. Right in Pirkei Avos it says that these three things take a person out of the world. Kina is jealousy, taiva, and kavod. They take a person out of the world. Now they may not affect anybody else because I may not act on them. Right, so I could spend my entire life being jealous of my next door neighbor because he has something that I want. Now, so long as I don't act on it, I don't do anything because of that jealousy, it doesn't affect him. He's not going to be hurt by that. But I'm not shalom with myself. It could eat me alive, right? With the I forget where it is, but the kin is referred to as the wreck of hatzamas. It rots the bones, right? Because it could eat, literally, we say in English, it eats you alive, right? It literally can eat you alive. Same thing with taiva. A person could be obsessed with taivas. He doesn't act on it. So it's not a problem between him and Hashem, and it's not a problem between him and other people, because he's not acting on it. But it could destroy. He has no peace of mind. He has no way of working on himself. And the same thing with kavod, right? There are people who are obsessed with kavod. They have to get kavod. Now they may not say anything to anybody if they don't get the kavod, but they go home and they koch, and it bothers them, right? And it upsets them. Why did that guy get an aliyah? Why did he get called up for an award? Why, right? It eats him alive. Now it doesn't necessarily affect anybody else. I mean, nobody else may even know about it. But it's so unhealthy. It's very unhealthy. That's why it takes a person out of this world, because it eats him up. It doesn't have to affect anybody else. It's between him and himself. But when a person is obsessed with these things, when jealousy is eating at him, when taiva is eating, he can't learn properly. He can't daven. It takes over the brain. So if he doesn't work on avos, and his midas are not great, in bekina taiva kavod, in b'chol kase atzvas, right? You have other ones also, anger, or now. So maybe he learned that he doesn't show it around other people. He doesn't exercise his anger by yelling at other people. But he gets home and he's screaming at the wall, right? It's not healthy. It's not healthy. And atzvus, which is depression, atzlas, laziness, right? These are things that may not affect anybody else, but they're not healthy for the person and does not help him grow in serving Hashem. He's not complete with himself. He quotes his Rabbi, who is also, I forgot from the original shir how he was married, how he was related, but it was also Rabbi. He says, Divrei rivois b'sharecha. It said, what? His son-in-law, or something, or maybe grandson, something. Yeah, he was married into the family, but he was his Talmud. Yeah. So he was a Talmud Muvak. The first year we gave a couple months ago, I did the whole yichus, but I don't remember it all so well. But he was also his Talmud Muvak. He wrote up a lot of the Beis Avrams, a lot of what we have from the Beis Avram, the Nesivos Shalom had written up from his Rebbe. So Divrei Rivos V'Sharecha. It says in the pasuk that you should bring the matters of dispute in your gates, and the way he explains it is Hanu B'Sharecha Shalcha, in your own gates. Sheb'Sharecha Hapnimim Yeshram Divrei Rivos, that inside of the gates of your heart there are struggles that are going on. There are these disputes going on. Right? The brain understands the right thing, but the heart wants something else. The heart and the brain, right? I think it was the Kutzker, or I think some quoted from Simcha Bonim of Pshischa, who was the Kutzker's Rebbe, that man spends 120 years on this planet trying to travel one amma, right? From here to here. That's our whole job in life, is to try to travel from the brain to the heart, to try to get them on the same page, right? They're always in conflict. And then what happens after the heart and the mind fight it out, and they decide on the course of action, which very often is not the right course of action? Then the limbs of the body, they're just the messengers who carry it out, right? But it's being decided between the mind and the heart. It says in the pasuk, "Ein shalom ba'atzmi." Now, ba'atzmi means like in myself. Also means in my bones. Like I'm not at peace in my bones, which matches what we said about kina, that it's the wreck of hatzamas, it rots the bones. I'm not complete, or I'm not at peace with my complete and peace. Also, both of them were shalom, right? So I'm not complete in my bones. I'm not complete in who I am. He's missing that element of himself. He's not at peace. When he's not the way he's supposed to be, so he's missing completion. He can't be happy, right? If a a person does not have peace of mind, he can't be happy. You need to have peace of mind is a very big, it's probably the biggest prerequisite for being happy, to be able to be sameach. A person has to have peace of mind. His life is not a life. Because the neshama is a piece of Hashem from above. It's constantly pointing out your shortcomings to you, the neshama, and it's hard for a person to be at peace when he hasn't worked on himself. Okay, so that's two. So we've explained already the relationship with others, the relationship with himself, and now brachas, which is the third, right? So we said nezikin is your interpersonal relationships. Avos is your relationship with yourself, and now bracha is your relationship with Hashem, which we mentioned at the beginning, relatively obvious. Immediately, the bracha so inyan Hashem is bein elevin boyrei. That's being okay and complete with Hashem. Shemashmos hapnimi shalmi the bracha shebechol hanoish nenami meisem alibe kil Hashem artzulay. What is a bracha generally? I'm about to drink this drink. I make a shahakal. I'm acknowledging that even though it looks like, if you brought in a forensic accountant, I went to work last week, I got a paycheck, I deposited the money in the account, I took my credit card, I bought the drink, and I paid. Doesn't seem like it has a lot to do with Hashem. But bracha is me stopping for a second and saying, but I recognize that ultimately all of that came from Hashem. That's what a bracha is supposed to do. Okay, not going to ask how we make brachas. We're not going to discuss about but that's what a bracha is supposed to do, right? It's supposed to be us stopping for a minute, for a second, for 5 seconds, and saying, despite all the things that it looks like, I recognize that this is from you, and thank you, Hashem, that I have this drink, this cold drink on a hot day. Okay, right? It all belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The hana that I'm going to have by drinking this thing, He gave us from His goodness that we can enjoy it. And therefore, I'm obligated to thank Hashem and to bless Him for this hana. Therefore, I am able to lift up and to fix the very physical act of eating. Eating is a very physical act, right? We know what the body does with the food. It's a very base physical act. We're able to lift it up and attribute it to Hashem. And I'm able to take any hana that I have with a bracha. That's why we make brachas on a lot of things. Even mitzvahs we make brachas on, right? But that's it. Fine. He quotes here, and I just put it on the bottom of the page if anybody wants to see it, that he quotes from the Marsha. The Marsha says something very much along these lines. If we have him 2 minutes at the end, you could see the Marsha was much earlier than the Nesivos Shalom. I mean, he said the Marsha says very bekitzer and doesn't go through all this detail, but he shows a basis from the Marsha. He says, so by taking all three, so what he's saying is that the Gemara it's not a machlokes. Rav Yehuda said Nezikin, right? Rava said Avos, and then there were others who said brachas. It's not a machlokes. You need all three. For a person to be complete, you need all three. He says, now we can explain another way, but it's really not another way. It's really, he's just going to draw it together very beautifully now. By the way, in the Nesivos Shalom, if you ever, the problem is sometimes you don't know what he's talking about, but take any piece of the Nesivos Shalom, read the last 2-3 paragraphs, and you get that powerful hug and that powerful punch, But the problem is that very often you need the whole beginning of the piece to understand what he's talking about in the last three paragraphs. But he always packages it so nicely, very often with Shabbos, as we've seen here a few times. But he says, so what is the Gemara talking about? We know the famous Brisa of Rav Pinchas ben Yair that Mesilas Yesharim is based on, right? That we have all the different things that bring, the different madregas that bring to higher ones. So the third highest madrega is Sha'acha madregas Kedusha, higher than Kedusha v'Tahara, minus madregas HaChasidus. Chasidus comes just before Ruach HaKodesh and Tchias HaMesim. But Chasidus is pretty much the highest. Ruach HaKodesh you need to get from Hashem. I mean, he talks about there also, but Chasidus is higher than Kedusha, Tahara. He says, Chasidus mevila de Ruach HaKodesh mevila de Tchias HaMesim. Harisha Chasidus hi hamadrega hagavoya b'yoser. Chasidus is higher, u'lamayla midargas tzaddik. Being a chassid, in the true sense of the word, as he explained, the person who lives chesed, is even higher than being a tzaddik, right? Which we wouldn't have, but that's also because the language has been used differently for us, but we wouldn't imagine that a chassid is higher than a tzaddik. But he's saying that al pi chazal, the Gemara, when the Gemara used the word chassid, the Gemara means that higher than a tzaddik. She'inyan Chasidus hu lifnim mishur sadin. He says, why? Because Chasidus is going above and beyond the letter of the law. She'achosid makbid leirak al mashem mechuyev al pi halacha. The Chosid, you could be a tzaddik if you keep every detail of halacha perfectly, but you don't try to go beyond that. A Chosid is always looking for more ways, better ways to serve Hashem. He does even what's beyond what's required by law. He's always looking for what can I do that will be good in Hashem's eyes. Besides, obviously he has to keep, as Rabbi said on Shabbos, and we always repeat, and every shir you always hear these, that of course there's no veering from halacha, but even within the confines of halacha, he's like, what would give Hashem even more nachas ruach? What would give Hashem even more hana from my actions? V'gam kol inyanim hagashmiyim, even all physical matters, inyanim rishus hamutarim, even things that are perfectly permissible. They're a thing perfectly permissible. Miskadish hachosid b'mutaloi umaloisim l'Hashem Yisbarach, like the famous Ramban at the beginning of Parashat Kedoshim, right? Kadish atzmecha b'mutalach, that even though a person technically could sit around all day eating, everything has the best hechsher in the world. He could sit there fressing all day, and he could do all kinds of things that are completely mutter. That's not what Hashem wants from us, right? Technically, you can't call him out. He didn't violate any halacha. This is talking about chassid is the one who's always looking for what more can I do. I'm not satisfied with just the fact that I gave $1 at Shachris this morning. What else can I do for people? That's why the Gemara says somebody wants to be a chassid. Everything that he does, even in his physical life, he wants to be mekadesh it, and he wants to dedicate all of his, even physical pleasures that he gets, he wants to dedicate it to Hashem. This is what Rabbi Yehuda said, you have to be mekayim milid nezaken. So this is, he's saying now, that Rabbi Yehuda is being mechadish to us, that even in things of nezikin, which seems like the most inconsequential parts of halacha, like, okay, you have to pay damages, and okay, we have to know what the halacha is, but that's not mitzvahs, right? It doesn't feel like that. Even those things that he's allowed to leave his thorns in his field, but he doesn't want to take the chance. Even though mitzad adin, he's not mechuyev in them. To bury the thorns 3 tvachim, so nobody suffers because nobody else suffers. And even when it comes to avos, he wants to do more than he's required to do between him and himself. All the midas that are taught in Mesechtes Avos, right? A lot of the things in Pirkei Avos, it's not halacha. They're not halachas, right? Siyag l'chach mashtika. It's not a halacha that you have to be quiet. There's nothing wrong with talking, right? But a person who's learning avos means I want to be better than just what the minimum requirements are. These are ways of life beyond the letter of the law. That somebody wants to be a chassid. Umili de brachas, and by brachas he says also the hainu lifnim mishur sadin ben levin bayre. It's also lifnim mishur sadin shemavad gidrei halacha. Besides, obviously there are times you have to make brachas, and brachas we're required to make brachas. But hu mekadosh atzmai gam b'mutaloi kedei lasis nachas ruach l'Hashem Yisbarach. He goes beyond that. How? Shebachol inyanav hagashmi hu shoykel b'dayta heita b'nei Hashem. He's always thinking, even when he's doing something that's just to give his physical body pleasure. He takes a cold drink. He wants to see how can I lift that up to Hashem. Even those things that are optional, those things that he's allowed to do, he's trying to sanctify them for Hashem. So this is an interesting thing he points out. You could save it for the next time you have to speak at Sheva Brachas. He says, when we have Sheva Brachas, we have Birchas Chasanim, Sheva Brachas. It says, what's the first bracha of Sheva Brachas? So he sets this up for us. This is when a new couple is about to build a Bayis Neman B'Yisrael. This is a major event in Klal Yisrael, the Shalshelis of Klal Yisrael. This is the beginning of, they're going to bring children into this world, they're going to continue the generations. What's the first bracha that we make? He says, Hushakol bara l'chvoidei. We're reminding the Chas and Kala, you're about to set out on your life, and you're going to build your house, and you're going to want nice furniture, and you're going to want to do things for yourself, and all that's great. But remember, everything has to be directed to one thing, that it's for the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if you remember that, then it's okay. Then get the nice furniture and then get the nice things, right? But if you remember, I've heard this from my Rabbi many times. He says, that there are people, this is a line that I heard of, he says, there are people who when they buy a house, so all the husband and wife could talk about for 2 months is what tiles are we going to get in the bathroom and what sinks. And he says, I'm very happy. Every Jew should have beautiful bathrooms. But the question is, why? Right? In other words, if you can afford, it's within your means, and you like nice things, and you feel like it's nice that the house, then it's perfectly fine. If that's what you're living for, so then you're forgetting this bracha that we first wished you when you stood on that chuppah. Jews can have nice things. We should have nice things. Jews work hard for their money. They should enjoy spending it. But the question is, are you doing it because when we come into a nice house, that we could host people in our house, we could do things, we can make a parlor meeting, we could have people here for tzedakah. Then of course, then it's amazing, then it's beautiful, and of course you should have nice things. Is it because of your own, go back to the shar that we talked about, because of my own arrogance, I want somebody else to come in and say, oh, he has the nicest bathroom in the neighborhood, right? So a person has to remember, okay, bathrooms maybe, but cars maybe that's a more reasonable thing to understand. But again, it's always a question of perspective. You could have two people who bought the exact same thing, and if one did it, he thought about Hashem the whole time, and he thanked Hashem. Even if he's not doing it completely for Hashem's honor, but he thanked Hashem, and he recognizes that it's Hashem who gave it to him. And the other person did it because he wants, when he drives down the street, everybody should say, oh, look, he got a fancy car. So one's a shar, and one's doing something. Your question?
Yeah. Well, perspective. Yeah. You say everything's perspective. Maybe this is a psychiatric perspective. I think he's talking heavily, in an understated way, about sexuality.
There's definitely an element of it. Strongly. Of course. Yes, taiva is all. First of all, every mention of taiva, the fire of taiva. Generally, the word taiva is all encompassing. Any type of thing that I have a physical desire for. But generally, that's the primary one. Like whenever we talk about the chuppah also, that everything, right. The idea, even in a relationship between a husband and wife, the question is the goal so they can have children. Now, a husband and wife are allowed to take pleasure in each other and in their relationship, but the purpose is to build a bayis neman in Klal Yisrael, right? It's true with everything. It's true. This flows through everything in our relationship with Hashem, right? Mashazeh inyan milei de brachas. So he says this is what the idea of brachas is. Shal yedei habrachas male es kol hanois olam hazeh lechvoidei yisbarach. That also is. It lifts all the hanas up to Hashem, right? Which is, by the way, just to your point, we have sheva brachas, right? Before a husband and wife are going to form that union, we also have brachas. There are brachas. Not every bracha is the way we pick up an apple and make a boyer pre-eitz, but we have brachas on everything. Every physical pleasure relates to brachas because the idea is that we want to connect those to Hashem. Right? That he's not. All right, the person the one who created us, we want to have those hanos in the way that he wants us to. And that's why you have, in general, this is a little bit of a side point, but in every hana, every pleasure that is forbidden to us, there's a corresponding pleasure that is permissible to us, right? Because Hashem wants us to enjoy the world, but in the right format and in the right way and under the right conditions. B'kedusha, where we recognize that it's Hashem and not just giving in to our base urges. Okay. On this week's parsha, so we mentioned at the beginning that the parsha opens up with the story of the Eved Ivri. So now you're going to see how a Chassidish Rabbi reads psukim the way you and I, with 100 years poring over this, would never have thought to read a pasuk this way. And it's obvious, I always have to say this sometimes when you speak and you have people who are somewhat Hasidically challenged, but that's not what the pasuk says. He knew that that's not what the pasuk says, and he read the pasuk the regular way also. But he's giving a little bit of a creative license, just listen to how he reads the pasuk. He says, we said the parsha starts off with the story of the Eved Ivri, right? The person who stole, and he ends up getting sold, and then we know that at one point what happens, he doesn't want to leave. After 6 years, he's supposed to go free. He doesn't want to leave his master. So look, he says, al pasuk, Amar Yomer HaEved. The Eved says, and I printed the psukim at the bottom also if you just want to see it in the format there, but he says, Amar Yomer HaEved, Ahafti es Adoni, I love my master. This is what I'm reading now, the way the pasuk, the simple pshat of the pasuk. Es ishti, my wife as banai, right? Because we know that an Eved Ivri, one of the unique halachas of an Eved Ivri, even though he's a full Jew, he's a full-fledged Jew, when he sells himself as an Eved Ivri, or not when he sells himself, when Bezdin sells him into slavery, his master could marry him to a Kanani slave woman, and they could have children. Now, when his term is up, he leaves, they stay. They're not. They belong to the master. So this guy comes at the end of 6 years. Time to go free. And we know the Gemara in Kedushin Daf Chav Beis tells us how well you have to treat an Eved Ivri. So he had it pretty good there. This is obviously a guy who didn't have money because that's how he ended up in this mess in the first place. So he doesn't want to leave. He doesn't want to leave. He likes his wife. He likes his children. He likes his master. He's happy to stay. So he says he wants to stay. So he says so that's his statement. He has to say this statement that I don't want to leave. I love them. He's saying three things that he loves. Ha'eved hu ha'eved ha'neman ha'eved Hashem. So now the Rebbe is saying, again, not Pashut Pshat, but he's saying, when we say Eved, what's a true Eved? A true Eved, right, is Moshe Rabbeinu was a true Eved. Eved is somebody who's a true Eved of Hashem. Shem Omer Yomer Ahafti Es Adoini. So I'm saying it the way the pasuk says it, but if you would change the vowels in Adoini, it could be Hashem's name, right? The way we pronounce Hashem's name most of the time. So he says Hareini Oyev Es Hashem Yisbarach. So the way the Rebbe reads the pasuk is the servant comes in, he's worked on his avodas Hashem in the three ways we discussed, and he says, I love my master, I love Hashem, right? Es ishti vezbanai. He says es ishti vezbanai. Without getting into technical, we had this also about 2 weeks ago in Daf Yomi. Es hu loshen tafel. Sometimes when the Torah uses the word es, it comes to tell me that the thing that comes after es is less significant than the thing that came before it. He gives the example over there. So tafel b'sari. We learned there about a person going to the mikvah. How do you know that when you go to the mikvah, you have to make sure there's nothing in your hair? Right? Because it says over there that you have to, the pasuk says, the es hatafel, so things that are, we learn the S by basar. It says that you have to rachatz es basarai. The S tells me those things that are subordinate to one's flesh, which includes one's hair. Right? It's not nobody would say that their hair. I mean, okay, I've met a few people who go crazy about their hair, but most people wouldn't say their hair is as important as their flesh. Right? So we see the word S could sometimes mean something that's less significant, less important. It says hainu. Shekol in yonei hagashmin tefillin hem etzla. He's saying ahafti es adoini es ishti ve'es banai, meaning my physical life, my wife, my children, is less important to me than my love for Hashem. That's what this Eved is saying. That all of his things in the physical world are less beloved to him. He loves them, but they're less beloved to him than his love for Hashem. That's what the next pasuk says, that when this Eved comes in and says this, so the master has to bore a hole into his ear, right? So Hashem, when a person makes this declaration that I don't love anything in this world as much as I love Hashem, so then Hashem says, I'm opening up your ears unlimited. You're going to receive godliness like you've never imagined. And then it says that he'll serve him forever, which in the pasuk means till yovel. But here he's saying that then you'll be a servant of Hashem forever. With all things in this world, that a person who lives this way, then even all those physical things, even those physical pleasures, right, will also become part of his avodas Hashem. There's no distinction then for him between whether he's doing a mitzvah or whether he's eating dinner. It's all about serving Hashem. If he has this kind of attitude that he wants to give everything to Hashem, and that is accomplished with those three areas that we discussed. And what I found amazing about this piece, and I hope you enjoyed it as well, is the way the Rabbi took a Gemara that. We read the Gemara. You want to be a chassid, learn avos, learn nizikin, learn brachas, but and he mamish said this is a way of serving Hashem. A person you want to be an eved Hashem. Think about your brachas, think about your midas, and think about not hurting anybody else. And if you focus on those three areas, you know. I mean, it seems like it's a little bit strange to say, but that's what Mishpatim is coming right after Yisro. That after Yisro we had this tremendous revelation. That's what we started the thing. That it's very difficult for us that Mishpatim comes afterwards. We started with this unbelievable revelation. You can just imagine. I know how we feel when we come out of a Hashivenu davening Shabbos morning, right? You feel like you're on a high, like you're walking on clouds. Imagine what they felt like leaving Har Sinai after they received the Torah. And then they get these very minutia type of rules. Hashem is telling them, it's great to have those highs, but make sure you don't hurt your friend. Make sure you're careful with your friend's money, with your friend's honor, with your friends. Make sure that your friend doesn't need anything. Before you could sleep at night, make sure that you don't there's somebody else out there who doesn't need something. Which is hard, but it all comes together. You can't live life just on these high moments of flying by Har Sinai and hearing the lightning and the thunder. The way to hold on to that and to stay at that level we were probably all Hasidim by Matan Torah. You want to keep that level, you need to work on this type of stuff. Shkoyach.